Watching the clock. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Insight session on wInsight. That's a tough one. wInsight Insight. Yeah.
wInsight.
So yeah, again, welcome everyone. Today we'll be presenting on wInsight, and my name is Lou Cuneo. I'm a Deltek sales rep out of Georgetown, Texas. My colleague Dan Domingos is a senior solutions engineer, and he's based out of the Herndon, Virginia area. So he will be presenting. If there are any questions, just go ahead and type them in the chat window. We have about 20 minutes today, so it's a very short window. At the end, we'll open it up for 5 minutes of Q&A, and we can unmute you if you'd like to talk, or you can just type the questions into the chat window. And with that being said, I know we've got a short time frame, so I'll let you take over, Dan.
All right, thanks, Lou. Appreciate it. So first, kudos, Lou, to your ever-present pink earphones. I do love seeing those on our Monday morning meetings, and it's good to see you have adopted them for Insight as well. So it's always a pleasure there. So thanks, Lou. My name is Dan Domingos. I am on the PPM solution engineering team. I do want to thank all of my other teammates for the wonderful job they have done up until this point in time. And I am the last one. This is the last of our Expo demo sessions. Obviously, there are still some other sessions to do, but this is it. So if you haven't seen those, you can always go back and revisit them with recordings. So let's go ahead and jump in. I basically got one slide that just sort of discusses what our intentions are for this 12 to 15 minutes of demonstration. Typically, when we see folks looking at our wInsight Analytics product, there's a number of pain points or challenges. And wInsight addresses those in a number of ways. It allows users to drill up, down, sideways to get really the data that they specifically want. It still provides reporting and analytical capabilities around earned value management, but it also does support the new IPM DAR file submission by importing both the cost performance and scheduled performance data sets. It can also create the cost performance data set for you if you need. And I'll briefly touch on some of that. It mainly provides dashboards to help validate project data, helping analysts identify problem areas within a project, but it also has a capability to allow project managers to look across their entire portfolio of projects, providing a means for them to perform roll-up reporting, management by exception, all of those good sorts of things. So in general, that's what we're sort of going to try to do in the limited amount of time that we actually do have. Just to reiterate a couple things that Lou had mentioned. If you have a question, please feel free, just go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll address it at the end, and we'll kind of hold those questions off until we actually get to the end. All right, so let me go ahead and jump in to our environment, and I'm going to talk specifically initially about wInsight Analytics, our analytics capability. And in this particular case, so there's two sort of flavors of wInsight. There's an administrative, there's an administration or a wInsight administrator where the data basically is brought into, and then there's ultimately the dashboarding tool, which is the analytics component. That's what we're looking at right here. So this is after the fact that all the data has been loaded in, and I've got multiple projects that I can look at. So on the left-hand side, you can see my listing of projects. I'm actually going to concentrate on one that we have called Awesome. And if any of you have ever been in one of our demonstrations, you might have heard, or in various webinars, solution spree sessions, and so on, you might have heard the name Awesome. And this is the project that we're looking at. Now we're looking at in wInsight Analytics. So in its rawest form, the data comes in to analytics. It can be viewed in what we call the master dashboard. And the master dashboard contains some of the more commonly typically looked at dash parts. And that is, in general, the sort view, which basically shows me a listing of, in this particular case, my WBS elements. And it shows me again, in this case, cumulative look at cost and schedule variances, the variance at complete, and so on. I have the ability to change from cumulative to current, from the amount to percent. I can change from WBS to other components like OBS, manager, whatever it is, the data that you extracted out of your cost tool, in this particular case, Cobra, and you've loaded into wInsight. If you've captured that information, you will be able to slice and dice in the particular manner that you're interested in. Now, in this case, I'm looking at the master dashboard. I'm looking at all my data, and there's lots of different dash parts on that there. The important thing to note here is that as I make selections, and this is really the power of wInsight Analytics, as I make selections, I am going to have the ability to, in fact, I'll just do it real quick here. You can see I've got some schedule variances on this 1100 and 1200 WBS elements. If I make those, if I select those two, you can see all of the other dash parts in this dashboard have changed. Not only in this dashboard, but on all the other dashboards as well. So the master dashboard really contains sort of that high level starting information. And then I have a series of other dashboards that allow me to sort of look horizontally into a different aspect of the data. And I'll touch on some of those in just a moment here. Okay. But the point being is that this is all make a selection and you get an immediate update to your dashboards based on the selections that you've actually made. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that data to get back sort of the starting point there. And as you can see in this particular case, based on the project that I'm looking at, I can see my top and bottom cost and schedule variances, and then variance at complete. I've also got a couple of charts down below here that show me some other information as well. Now, all of these charts can be exported out to Excel. So, and it's WYSIWYG, right? What you see is what you get. So however I have it organized, sorted, selected, or whatever, I can go ahead and click on that particular button and open up that file, and it comes out in Excel exactly the way that you happen to see it. So if you wanted more detail, you would explode it further. If you wanted less detail, you would roll it up, so on and so forth, okay? So anywhere where you see this little icon here that basically is sending the information to Excel. And of course, if I wanted to see a little bit more information, like make this guy a little bit bigger, I have the ability to do that as well. So sort of the standard fare is what you're looking at here. If you're not sure about what the meaning of these colors and the arrows are, well, there's a nice little legend down here that basically says, hey, I'm comparing last period to this period, and I'm making it red if it, if the performance decreased by more than 10%. I'm making it blue if it got better by 10%. And then the arrows indicate, in which direction the threshold has actually changed. So you could be red right now, but you could have an up arrow. Let's see if I have any examples of those. I don't really. This basic guy basically says, hey, I'm bad and I'm getting worse. This yellow says, hey, I'm getting bad and I'm getting worse. I'm trending toward red and I'm actually getting worse, okay? All right, so that's sort of the crux of the master dashboard. A couple other items that we'll discuss, and I'm just going to go ahead and make this selection once again. So I'll highlight those two particular items, and I'm going to run over to the data validation screen. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to clear that data and go to this because it's a little bit nicer to see. So data validation is really nice because this is sort of like a validity check for your project, and it allows you to get a sense of how I'm doing from the 4 major types of validations. And then, in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and click on, let's see, we've got some yellow unrealistic EACs. Let's go ahead and isolate unrealistic EACs. And these are the 4 checks that it's doing there, okay? Now, all of these checks can be modified. So for example, out of the box default, the check that it's doing to get an idea if it's a realistic EAC is it has to be within plus or minus 5%. The CPI, it has to be within plus or minus 5% of the to-go performance index, right? So in this particular case, it's saying, hey, you provided an EAC and it's outside the bounds of what your CPI minus TCPI PI happens to be by plus or minus 5%. If that's too much for you, you can change it to 10% or even 15%. So if you often have those sorts of situations, you don't want it to show that you have these unrealistic ASCs when you're always going above or beyond that particular threshold. So you can establish your own thresholds, just as an example. So there's a range of other checks that you have out there that allow us to go off and put that information into wInsight in this validation check, but you also have the ability to create your own. So that's pretty nice. The other thing that I'll do, I'm going to go back to the dashboard. I'm going to select a different project, the big rocket project here, and I'm going to go out and look at the emerging issues. Now, in this particular guy, on that previous dashboard, we saw that we had a lot of red, and those are issues that we're going to have to write up our variance analysis against. Do our narratives, if you will. In this particular case, this emerging issues is nice because it says, hey, there are 3 items here from a cost and schedule standpoint that have not yet exceeded those thresholds that you're going to have to write variances against, but they are emerging issues. These things you need to take care of, otherwise they are going to cross that threshold and you're going to have to start writing variances against them. So in this particular case, it's nice because you have the ability to sort of mitigate the risks of these things turning into actually issues that you're going to have to resolve. Okay. And again, if I were to have made selections, you saw in the data validation, in fact, I'll come back in the master dashboard. I'll just arbitrarily select a couple of guys here and go back to those emerging issues, and hopefully, I still selected the right one. So let me go back and choose one that actually isn't. It's probably the software guy here. So if I just isolate on software, I can come back into emerging issues, and you can see that I've only got 1 instead of 3. And that's because it's specifically on that particular item that I have selected. Okay. So as you make selections in one dashboard, they actually carry on to future dashboards. Okay. Now, one last thing I'll talk about in this case is that we had in an older version of wInsight, and actually it's still available, but it's not really marketed much anymore. There was a sort of an add-on to wInsight called the Briefing Wizard. And the Briefing Wizard I actually used when I was out back at Booz Allen some 10 years ago or so. And it was great because I could select specific reports and charts that I wanted, and I could press a button and it would go off and it would create a PowerPoint slide for each of those. And then I could add a little narrative and I can use that to present for my monthly status review or whatever it happens to be. Well, what wInsight Analytics now allows you to do is it allows you to create these bookmarks so that you can actually create those slides for your status review directly on the screen. And the beauty about that is, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on the first one. And it says, hey, I'm going to show you the lifter project where the cost variances exceed the threshold. And it takes me to the lifter project and back to the actual master dashboard where I wanted to see this information. I could go ahead and I could brief this particular slide. And if someone says, hey, well, what about X, Y, and Z? Let's zoom in on that and see what the details are below it. Or, and I can zoom in on it and I can scroll down and see if there are any lower level details around this guy. And there doesn't happen to be, so that's what it is. And I kind of ruined my slide, but that's no big deal. I can just go ahead and go back into it, for example, click it, and it refreshes back to where I happen to be. And you can see there's all the elements down to that lowest level. But then I can go on to the next slide. So now I can go on to the next lifter slide. In this case, it shows me that we're concentrating on a different look and feel and so on and so forth. So it's really nice to be able to not only just do your analysis, but also to be able to accomplish your briefing as well. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to quickly look at is how this data got into the system. And excuse me. As I mentioned on sort of the slides, is that the wInsight has the ability to take in your cost performance data as well as your schedule performance data, and it can also export out your cost data. Sorry, import your cost, schedule data, and then export out your cost data. So if you got a file from Cobra, for example, and you wanted to bring it in to analyze it, I can do it a number of ways, but one of the ways that we can actually do it is Cobra can produce what's called the DCDE file, which is our Deltek proprietary cost file that allows us to share data between our individual products. So I could load that in, suck that information in. Now I'm viewing it in wInsight. I also, if I get if Cobra produces me the actual IPM DAR CPD file, or if I'm not using Cobra and I'm pulling it in from another source, I can simply locate that file, pull it in, and it pulls the information in so that I can view it like we were just looking at in wInsight Analytics. Okay, so I've basically kind of skipped ahead a little bit because I wanted, I'm showing you the administrator tool, and that's really all I wanted to show there. It's a typical administrator tool where you load your data in, you can secure the information. That's where you can do some setup of what your data, how your data is going to be coming into the system by dollars, by K dollars, things along those lines. But I'll sort of leave it at that. We're right up against my time. I do certainly want to open it up for questions to see if there are in fact any.
We do have one question that came in, Dan.
Go ahead, Lou.
So Mitch asked, can you demo a filter by CAM?
I don't know that I have CAM set up on this particular guy, but let me just take a quick look here. If I go into detail analysis, one of my items is CAM. Let's go ahead and see if I can do it. There you go. That's Lindstrom's, his data in the detail analysis. And you can see that it changed from, if I clear the data, that's showing me all. So that's what it would look like. If I were in any other view, if I were back into the dashboard and I had, I do have the CAM filter here. So let's go ahead and do that. So there's Lindstrom there. So you can see he has one control account that he's associated with, and that's what it would look like. So hopefully that's answering the question, Mitch.
Yep, he said thank you.
Perfect.
Do we have any other questions that have come up that you guys can chat over, or you can unmute yourself and ask them if you'd like?
Can do that as well. I'll come back here for now. Okay. So Lou, there was sort of a frequently asked question.
Yep.
Do you have a couple of those?
Yeah, sure. So a question that comes up a lot is, does wInsight produce IPMR formats?
Oh yeah, so I showed the IPM DAR. It does produce the IPMR formats, and you can get those through the actual through the actual wInsight administrator tool. And you can actually link, you can actually create a scenario in wInsight Analytics where you're pulling in that IPMR information. So long answer, yes, it creates the, you can do all 5 formats of the IPMR reports.
Okay. Another question that comes up frequently is, does wInsight integrate directly with Cobra?
It does, in fact. So I showed an example of how you could simply pull in the XML file or the DCDE file from Cobra. When you export the information out of Cobra, you can actually, if you have wInsight installed and you have a link to be able to see it, you can actually click a button that says send directly to wInsight. You do that and the information is directly in wInsight. It's accessible to you. You don't have to go through that middle step of exporting it and importing. All you have to do is export and the information goes into the database.
Okay. We've got about 2 minutes. If there are any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I've got a handful more that I can ask, but would love to have some more questions from our attendees. One other question that I have, Dan, is can I load non-Deltek generated data into wInsight?
That's a tough question, because I think when you get wInsight, you're signing a form that basically says you're going to be using wInsight Analytics for earn value information. If it's not Deltek product, the answer is yeah, you can do it. So if again, for example, if it's not coming out of Cobra, it's coming out of a different tool, it's coming directly out of Excel, you absolutely can. But I think the addendum, and you might know a little bit more about this than I do, Lou, but I think the addendum says that it has to be earned value information, or it has to be information generated with respect to doing project management, something along those lines. So it just depends on what type of data it is that you're trying to do.
Okay, and we got another question that came from Mitch.
Yep.
Does wInsight 8.4 replace WAM, which I think is wInsight Analytics module?
Well, I'm showing, so the wInsight Analytics module is what I'm showing. So if, with the wInsight Analytics, this WAM utility that I'm looking at right now has been around since wInsight 8. So whether you're on 8.0.123.123 or 4, you're still using this wInsight Analytics module, which is basically just this click view component of wInsight.
Yeah, I think that addressed the last question that Mitch had was, will wInsight 8.4 still use click tech?
Click view at this point, yes, it's still using click view. But if you went to the and you can do the recording on the 9 o'clock Eastern, or sorry, 11 o'clock Eastern time, I think it was yesterday. The PPM product management team went through sort of the next generation and what we're actually doing. And I think they talked about how we're moving everything to web-based. In that particular case, once wInsight is a web-based tool on the same platform that Touchstone is on, ClickView goes away. Everything's self-contained in its sort of proprietary component.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we're a minute, we're a minute over. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending. If any other questions come up, you can reach out to us at any time. We'll be happy to set up a one-on-one meeting with you. Again, thanks for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of wInsight.
Yep.
Thanks,
Dan.
Thanks,
guys. Appreciate it.